Hello, boys and girls. It's Mr. Rhodey here, and I'm so excited to be one of your guest readers for the fairy tale unit. And I have one for you today called Sleeping Bobby. I think you're going to like it. It's a little bit long, so sit back, relax, and enjoy Sleeping Bobby by Will Osborne and Mary Pope Osborne. Once upon a time, a king and a queen wanted a child very badly. Every day the queen would say to the king, "Do you wish we had a little one to share our kingdom with?" And every day the king would answer the same way, "Yes, my dear, I wish we did." One day, the king was swimming in the royal pond when a frog hopped on the bank. "I'm here to tell you that your wish will soon be granted," said the frog. "Within a year, you will have a baby boy." "Why, thank you," said the king, and he rushed home to tell the queen the good news. A year later, a baby boy was born to the royal couple. The child was so extraordinary and so delightful that the king and the queen wanted him to have a very special name. "How about Bob?" asked the queen. "Bob he shall be," replied the king. To celebrate the birth of Bob, the king and the queen planned a huge feast. They invited almost everyone in the realm, including the kingdom's 12 wise women, for whom they set a table all of their own. In truth, there were 13 wise women in the kingdom, but since the queen had only enough good china to serve 12, one had to be left out. On the night of the feast, each of the wise women presented a gift to Bob. One gave him kindness, another courage, a third modesty. The gifts were all qualities that anyone might wish for and admire. Just as the 12th wise woman was about to bestow her gift, the door of the royal nursery flew open and the 13th wise woman burst into the room. "How dare you have a feast and not invite me?" she shouted at the king and the queen. "There was a problem with the china," said the queen. "Silence!" said the 13th wise woman, who in her rage did not seem very wise at all. "Invited or not, I have a gift for Bob too. On his 18th birthday, he shall prick his finger with a spindle and fall down dead." And with that, she stormed out of the room, slamming the door behind her. The king and the queen and their guests were all horrified. But when the 12th wise woman, who had not yet presented her gift, stepped forward, she said, "Perhaps I can help. This shall be my gift to Bob. On his 18th birthday, he will not die, but will fall into a deep sleep that will last for 100 years." The king and the queen were silent for a moment. "Is that the best you can do?" the king finally asked. "I'm afraid it is," said the 12th wise woman. "Alas, we are not allowed to completely undo each other's curses." "I see," said the king. "Then I will have to take matters into my own hands." The following day, the king issued a proclamation. Spinning of any kind was strictly forbidden in the kingdom, and all the spindles were to be destroyed at once. "That should take care of it," he said to the queen. "I certainly hope so," the queen replied. With no spindles anywhere to be found and no spinning allowed, the 13th wise woman's curse was soon forgotten. Bob grew up to be kind and clever and modest and very handsome. By the time he was a young man, he had so many good qualities that everyone who knew him admired him tremendously. For Bob's 18th birthday, the king and the queen planned a splendid birthday party. On the morning of the celebration, they rode into town to buy the finest presents and provisions, leaving Bob on his own. Among his other good qualities, Bob had a great curiosity and a taste for adventure. There were many parts of the castle he had never explored. So while his parents were out, he began wandering through the deserted hallways and peeking into hidden rooms and parlors. Eventually, Bob came upon a mysterious staircase. "How peculiar," he said. "I don't believe I've ever seen this before." He climbed the steep stairs to a small wooden door. A whirring sound came from the other side. Bob pushed open the door, and inside an old woman sat spinning flax at a large wooden wheel. "Hello," said Bob. What on earth is that? It's a spinning wheel, said the old woman. Would you like to try it? Yes, please, said Bob, always polite and ready for an adventure. Bob sat down beside her. As soon as he touched the wheel's spindle, a splinter pricked his finger. Ouch, said Bob. Good night, Bobby, said the old woman. Immediately, Bob sank into a deep, enchanted sleep. So deep was his sleep that the entire castle fell under its spell. The king and the queen, returning home from their party errands, collapsed in the front hall. The horse in the stable munching his oats, the sweeper in the courtyard sweeping the leaves, the dog in the doorway scratching his fleas, the cook in the kitchen scolding the scullery maid, the flies in the pantry buzzing around the bread, all fell fast asleep where they munched, swept, scratched, scolded, or buzzed. The flames in all the hearths also slept. Even the wind slept, and the leaves of the trees. As the castle slept, a great hedge of thorns grew up around it. Years passed, and the thorn hedge grew higher and higher until its brambles covered the entire castle, even the tallest towers. Meanwhile, rumors spread that a kind, clever, modest, and very handsome prince lay sleeping somewhere in the hidden castle, hidden by a giant thorny hedge. No one knew exactly where the castle was or why a handsome prince was sleeping there. They only knew that the prince's name was Bob. As rumors of Bob spread throughout the land, young women from far and wide began to search for him. A few found their way to the enchanted castle, but when they tried to pass through the hedge, they were stopped by the sharp, prickly thorns. Nearly 100 years passed. Then one day a kind, clever, modest, and very lovely princess set out into the world to seek her fortune. In her travels, she often heard people speak of a very handsome prince named Bob, who had been sleeping for 99 years in a thorn-covered castle. She also heard that many young women had searched for Bob, but all had been stopped by the thorny hedge. If this Bob is all they say, it will take more than some shrubbery to keep me from meeting him, said the princess. Like Bob, the princess had a great curiosity and a taste for adventure. Up and down the land, through the woods and valleys, over the fields and plains, the princess searched for the hidden castle. Finally, she came upon the gigantic hedge she'd heard so much about. As luck would have it, the princess arrived exactly 100 years to the hour since Bob had pricked his finger. Before her very eyes, the thorns of the giant hedge turned to flowers, and the branches beckoned her inside. When the princess got off her horse, the hedge parted to let her enter the castle grounds. The princess soon realized that time had stopped for the mysterious castle. She walked past the horse in the stable, the sweeper in the courtyard, the dog in the doorway. She passed the cook in the kitchen, the flies on the bread, and the king and the queen in the front hall. All looked exactly as they had 100 years before, when they had fallen under the 13th wise woman's curse. The princess wandered the still palace, winding through mysterious hallways, peeking into hidden rooms and parlors. At last she came to the staircase that led to the room in the tower where Bob slept. She climbed the stairs and pushed open the door. There was Bob lying on the bed exactly where he had lain for 100 years. Oh my, she breathed, he is handsome. In fact, Bob was so handsome that the princess could not help herself. She leaned over and kissed him on the lips. Bob opened his eyes and stared sleepily at the princess. What time is it? He said. Bob and the princess fell deeply and immediately in love. Holding hands, they went downstairs and found that all the castle had awakened with Bob. The horse was munching his oats, the sweeper was sweeping the leaves, the dog was scratching his fleas, the cook was scalding the scullery maid, and the flies were buzzing around the bread. The flames leapt in the hearth, and the wind whistled in the trees. The king and the queen yawned and stretched. The princess and Bob asked the king and the queen if they could be married as soon as possible, and they were that very afternoon. Bob's birthday party became a wedding celebration, and the king and the queen and the princess and Bob and even the dog in the doorway lived happily ever after. The end. Boys and girls, I hope you liked that story, Sleeping Bobby. I miss all of you. I hope to see you soon, and I hope you're doing well. Mr. Rhodey sends his best. Take care, everybody.